Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to explore new territory.
Awesome. So today we're tackling English listening skills, specifically for beginners. We found this guide, and it's packed with helpful stuff.
Oh, yeah. Listening skills are often overlooked. It's like the foundation of language learning.
Right. I mean, think about it. If you can't understand what someone's saying, how are you supposed to respond?
Exactly. But this guide, it goes beyond just listen more. It digs into strategies and techniques. Like one of the first things it emphasizes is starting simple.
Starting simple.
Hmm.
Hmm. Makes sense, but why is that so crucial? Especially for beginners.
Well, imagine being thrown into a conversation where you barely recognize any words.
Overwhelming.
Totally. It's like sensory overload for your brain.
Yeah, I can see that.
But when you start with manageable content, short, slow conversations, maybe something on YouTube.
Ah, bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, exactly. It gives your brain a chance to process, to get familiar with the sounds.
Like baby steps.
Exactly. It's like learning the alphabet before you try to write a novel.
Makes sense. So instead of getting bombarded with complex stuff, you're training your ear to recognize those basic sounds and patterns.
Absolutely. And that actually leads perfectly into the next big idea from the guide. Repetition, repeated listening.
Okay, now some might think just hitting replay is passive, not really learning.
Yeah, I get that. But this guide argues that repetition can be super active if you do it right.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do you make repeated listening an active thing?
Well, the key is to have a purpose each time you listen. Like, first listen, you're just trying to get the main idea, right? The gist of it.
Very, yeah.
Then, second time through, maybe you focus on picking out keywords. And the third time,
Third time's the charm.
maybe you could focus on the nuances, like how they're pronouncing things, the intonation, the rhythm.
Wow, so each listen you're going deeper, uncovering a new layer.
Yeah, I like that. Reminds me of when I was learning Italian, I'd listen to the same opera aria over and over again.
An opera aria,
Huh.
fancy.
Well, I was really into it at the time, but each time I listened, I'd pick out a few more words, understand a bit more of the emotion behind the music. It was so rewarding.
That's cool. It shows how repetition, done right, can help you really absorb the sounds, the music of a language.
Mm.
Okay, so this guide also talks about using a bunch of different channels for listening practice, not just language apps.
Oh, absolutely. They encourage exploring things like music, podcasts, even audiobooks.
A whole buffet of listening options.
I like that. But choosing the right resources for your level is crucial. You don't want to jump into the deep end too soon.
Right, like tossing a beginner into a super fast-paced political debate wouldn't be very helpful.
Probably not. The guide specifically recommends starting with things that are generally slower and clearer, like children's songs, maybe some simple pop music, anything with easy to understand lyrics.
Yeah, songs you can sing along to.
Exactly. Music is amazing for learning. The rhythm and melody actually help with memory. And honestly, it's just more fun than memorizing vocabulary lists. Of course, even with music, you don't want something with overly complex or obscure lyrics.
Right. It's about finding that balance between enjoyment and actually understanding what's being said.
Absolutely.
Now, moving beyond music, the guide also recommends podcasts and audiobooks, specifically mentioning things like ESL Pod or short stories for English learners. What makes these resources so beneficial?
Well, they often use what's called controlled language.
Controlled language.
It means the vocabulary and grammar are simplified, and the speakers usually speak clearly and slowly. It's specifically designed for learners.
Ah, so it's like training wheels for your ears.
Mm,
As you get more comfortable, you can move on to more challenging stuff.
precisely. And as your confidence grows, so does your stamina for listening to more complex content.
This guide doesn't just focus on passively listening, though. It also stresses the importance of actively combining listening with speaking.
Absolutely. It highlights the power of something called mimicry.
Mimicry. Interesting. That's not something I ever thought of as a learning technique.
It's incredibly powerful, actually. Think about it. You're not just hewing the sounds, you're trying to reproduce them.
Ah, so you're engaging both your mind and your body in the process.
Yes, it's like a workout for your tongue and vocal cords. The more you practice forming the sounds, the more natural they become.
Right? Practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
But the guide also mentions shadowing, which I have to admit I'm not entirely sure what that means.
Shadowing is basically mimicking in real time. So you listen to a phrase and then you try to repeat it immediately afterwards, matching the speaker's pace and intonation as closely as possible.
Like an echo.
Exactly. It might feel a little awkward at first, but it really forces you to pay attention to those subtle details.
Ah, the nuances of pronunciation.
Exactly. And all this talk about active listening, mimicry, shadowing, it all boils down to one crucial thing: consistent practice.
Practice, practice, practice. The guide really emphasizes that. It even suggests incorporating some passive listening into your routine. Things like having English music or podcasts playing in the background while you're doing other things.
Yeah, I think that can be helpful, especially for getting used to the sounds of the language. It creates an immersive environment without you having to actively study. But it's super important to remember, passive listening should be a supplement, not a replacement for more focused practice.
Gotcha. So it's like with any skill, consistency is key. And luckily, we live in a time where there are so many resources available to help us make daily practice a reality. This guide mentions a bunch of language learning apps like Duolingo, LingQ, ELSA, and websites like VOA Learning English, BBC Learning English. Do you have any favorites or any advice for choosing the right ones?
Honestly, I think the best resource is the one that you genuinely enjoy using, the one that fits your learning style. Some people thrive on structured lessons, while others prefer a more game-like approach. The key is to experiment and find what works best for you.
I love that. It's about taking ownership of your learning. And speaking of making learning fun, the guide suggests watching cartoons or children's shows in English.
Now that's a great idea. Think about it. Cartoons often have simplified language, they exaggerate pronunciation, and they're visually engaging. Plus, you're more likely to stay engaged if you're entertained.
It takes the pressure off. It's not studying, it's enjoying a story.
Exactly. And that's ultimately what we want, to make language learning enjoyable so we keep coming back for more.
Couldn't have said it better. So, to recap, improving English listening skills for beginners is about consistent practice, using a variety of engaging methods, and starting simple.
You got it. And it makes me wonder, what specific aspect of English listening do you, our listeners, find the most challenging? And what strategy from our deep dive today are you most excited to try out?
Great questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts. But for now, happy listening and good luck on your English learning adventure.